The Land of Stories, The Enchantress Returns, Chapter 6, Positioning the Gnomes. Alex and Connor stopped breathing. They felt like their hearts had fallen out of their bodies. "What?" Alex asked. "Kidnapped?" Connor gasped. "What do you mean, kidnapped? By who?" Alex covered her mouth in horror. Connor frantically shook his head from side to side, not wanting to believe it. Who would want to kidnap a nurse who worked at a children's hospital? How much danger was she in? The situation must be bad if soldiers and fairies from another world were standing in their house. Their grandmother closed her eyes tightly. "I don't have time to explain," she said softly. Connor turned bright red. "What do you mean, you don't have time to explain?" he shouted. "You give us that information and expect us not to have questions?" Their grandmother looked down at them sternly. "I'm expecting you to trust that I'm handling it to the best of my ability," she said. "We're not children anymore, Grandma. You have to tell us what's going on," Connor said. He had never had a reason to raise his voice to her before in his life. "I know that, and that's why I'm being honest with you. You deserve to know the truth. There is much to discuss later, but right now the less you know the better. Is that the understood?" Grandma said. They didn't respond because they didn't understand or agree one bit. Buster barked up at the fairy godmother. Oddly, he hadn't been fazed by the newcomers in their home. "Grandma, please, we need to know what's going on," Alex managed to say through her tears. "It'll have to wait. Right now, I need to speak with Sir Lambton," Grandma said. "What does he have to do with anything?" Connor asked, remembering the friendly head of Cinderella's royal guard he and his sister had met in the fairy tale world. Grandma bent down and looked into Buster's uneven eyes, and the dog sat up straight. The twins had never seen him look so obedient. "Sir Lambton, have you seen anything strange or out of the ordinary?" Grandma asked. Connor glanced over at Alex. Had their grandmother lost her mind? Did she forget dogs couldn't talk in their world? And why on earth was she calling him Sir Lambton? Buster barked a single bark at her and nodded, as if he had understood perfectly. "Oh, forgive me," Grandma said apologetically, and waved her wand towards the dog. "Speak." A flash of light traveled from the tip of her wand and into the dog's mouth. Buster began barking, but the sound slowly morphed into the sound of coughing. Human coughing. "Pardon me," the dog said. "My word, it's been a long time since I've had to pronounce anything." Both of the twins gasped. They weren't strangers to talking animals, but hearing their own dog suddenly speak left them completely flabbergasted. "Nothing out of the ordinary at all," the dog said. "Charlotte left for work this morning and hasn't been home since." "Sir Lambton?" Alex peeped through her hands covering her mouth. "Is that you?" "Your dog," Connor said. "Indeed, children," the dog confessed and lowered his head. "I'm sorry I couldn't reveal my identity to you. Your grandmother wanted someone looking after you, but thought having a soldier living in her house would cause you to worry. So she turned me into a dog." Connor turned to his sister, reddening by the second. "We can't even have a dog without it being a magical conspiracy?" "It's been very challenging," Sir Lambton said. "Dog food and cleaning oneself are some things I don't think I'll ever get used to. And the urge to taste and smell absolutely everything are quite bothersome. But for you two, I'd walk to the ends of the earth." It was a sweet sentiment from their late father's old friend, but the twins didn't have any room for gratitude in their heads. "Do you know about this, Bob?" Alex asked. Bob had been so still, the twins had almost forgotten he was there. He had turned a pale shade of green and was holding his stomach. It was clear by the horrified look on his face he had nothing to do with it. This was the first talking animal he had ever seen. "I hope you can forgive me for casting a little spell on you at the shelter, but I had to make sure you chose Sir Lambton to bring home," Grandma said. "I thought you were just a friend of Charlotte's. I had no idea you were so involved." I, Bob muttered. "I think I'm going to be sick." He ran straight for the bathroom on the other side of the house. Obviously, Bob had reached his surprise limit for the night. "So this whole time we thought we had a dog, when really we had a babysitter?" Alex asked, trying to wrap her head around it. "A protector, not a babysitter," Grandma said. A protector from what? Connor asked. Their grandmother and Sir Lambton looked at each other. The twins knew they were set on keeping as much information from them as possible without being dishonest. I promise to share with you the appropriate information as I learn it, Grandma said. It's a concerning time in the fairy tale world, and it's kept me very occupied. The situation recently reached a peak, and I was worried it would affect you, so I made the proper arrangements to make sure you were protected. Unfortunately, it seems your mother had fallen victim to it. Speaking of precautions, fairy godmother, Xanthos interrupted, we should position the gnomes while the neighborhood is empty. Gnomes? Connor mouthed to Alex. Very well, Grandma said and looked to the other guards she had entered the house with. I'd like to take the first shift watching inside of the house. The rest of you please follow me outside so I may place you. Grandma and Xanthos quickly led the soldiers outside to the front lawn. The twins followed closely behind them with Sir Lambton at their feet and watched from the porch. Even though they knew she was a veteran leader of the fairy tale world, happily ever after assembly, it was still strange watching their small grandmother give orders to the large soldiers. Take your place, Grandma instructed. The soldiers positioned themselves on the perimeter of the Bailey's front yard. Their house looked like a miniature Buckingham Palace. The fairy godmother waved her crystal wand, and one by one turned each soldier into a lawn gnome with a bright flash. They all had pointed red hats and white beards. They look just like the gnomes in our neighbor's yard, Connor said. I almost tripped over one time today. That was a soldier, actually, Sir Lambton said down by his knee. He's been watching the outside of the house for a couple of months. Creepy, Connor said. What's going on out here? Said a sweaty and green-faced Bob stepping out of the house. Where'd all the soldiers go? And where all those gnomes come from? You've just answered your own question, I'm afraid, Alex said. Bob's eyes darted around the front lawn as he understood. The twins felt sorry for him. In less than an hour, he had discovered his girlfriend had been kidnapped and had ties to the fairy tale world. But overall, they thought he was handling it well. After the fourth time I vomited, I realized I wasn't dreaming, Bob said. I have no history of mental illness in my family. So my best self-diagnosis is that it's just one of those nights. Don't worry, Bob. The shock wears off eventually, Connor said to him. I think Alex and I have only known for a year and we're still waiting. Grandma walked back to the porch with Xanthos, giving him careful instructions as they went. The soldiers may be an eyesore for the neighbors, but at least they're disguised, she said. I want you to stay here and watch over the twins. No one is to enter or leave this house without permission. Alex and Connor only heard the tail end of their conversation, but it was enough to infuriate them. What do you mean no one can come or go? Connor said. We're going to be stuck in our own home? Until it's safe, Grandma said. But I have to work, Bob said. I have patients and surgeries to attend to. People need me. Grandma thought on this for a few moments. You may come and go as you wish, she said. With all due respect, it's my grandchildren I'm worried about. What about school? Alex asked. You can go back as soon as everything has settled down and we figure out where your mother is, but for right now we can't risk it, Grandma said. The less contact with the outside world, the better off you'll be. I'll write the school and tell them you both fallen terribly ill. You can't lock us up, Connor yelled, loud enough for the whole street to hear. We haven't done anything wrong, Alex shouted. Why are you punishing us like this? Their grandmother waved her wand and each of them and they went silent. They tried speaking, but no sound came out. She had magically muted them. Please obey my instructions, Grandma said. Even with several soldiers, Xanthos and Sir Lambton watching over you, I'll be worried sick. Grandma looked down at Sir Lambton. I'd like for you to stay a dog for this time being, she said. The gnomes will attract enough unwanted attention as it is. Yes, ma'am, Sir Lambton said with reluctance. He had been quietly hoping his dog days were over. Now I must be going, Grandma said. She waved her wand and the voices of her silenced grandchildren returned. So that's it then, Connor said. For a year we heard nothing from you. And now suddenly it's, hey kids, your mom's been kidnapped, and oh yeah, I'm putting you both on house arrest. I never thought you could do something like this to us, Grandma, Alex said and looked at her grandmother as if she was a stranger. Their grandmother took these comments to heart. She didn't like disappointing them, but unfortunately she had no choice. She could only do what she thought was best and hope they'd forgive her one day. I know you'd slack me a great deal at this moment, their grandmother said, but you're the only family I have left. You mean more to me than anything else in this world. One day when you have families of your own, you'll learn that there is no length you wouldn't go to ensure their safety, even if they end up hating you for it. She left them on the porch in the hands of the others and walked off into the night, slowly disappearing into soft, sparkly clouds. I love you both, she said sadly, and a second later she was gone. We should get inside before anyone sees us lingering on the porch, Xanthos said. He and Lambton escorted Bob and the twins inside. Whether the lockdown would last days, weeks, months, or years wasn't certain, but for the time being, the Bailey twins were prisoners in their own home. The first few days of captivity went by very slowly for the twins. They couldn't eat or sleep. All they could do was worry about their mother. The question that haunted them for the most, however, was why had she been taken? How could their mother, a simple nurse at a children's hospital, have gotten involved in all of this? Why had their grandmother been taking such measures to protect her grandchildren in another dimension? Was their mother even in this world, or had she somehow been taken into the fairy tale world? Xanthos and Lambton were tight-lipped about the whole thing. Despite the daily pleas from the twins to tell them something, anything, they insisted no news was the best news. Unfortunately, the twins' imaginations did little to soothe their distress. Were the Troll King and Goblin King seeking revenge on the twins for stealing their crown a year ago? Had the big bad wolf pack somehow resurfaced? Did it have something to do with the evil queen and her magic mirror? The twins didn't have any answers, and it was driving them mad. Also, testing their sanity was how crowded their home had become. Their rental house felt small, and just 3 people and a dog, but now a dozen grown men had been added to the mix. The guest room had been filled with cots, and most of the downstairs looked like an army camp, with swords and shields and pieces of armor everywhere you looked. Xanthos ran a tight ship while he looked after the Bailey home. He was very strict about the soldiers' shifts, making sure they rotated being gnomes and being in the house evenly. Meals were always served at precisely the same times every day. The twins were only allowed outside once a day in their backyard, and only if Lambton was watching them. Xanthos was very devoted to his duties too. He spent every day glued to the window facing the front yard, and the twins never saw him sitting down for more than a few seconds. Bob had been very kind and checked up on the twins every morning on his way to work. His stories of the sick children he was taking care of at the hospital were the only contact they had with the world outside, so they looked forward to it every morning. The bags under his eyes were a clear indicator that he felt as helpless as the twins did. He also unsuccessfully tried getting information out of Xanthos and Lambton. At one point, he tried bribing Lambton with a bright, bouncy ball in exchange for Charlotte's supposed whereabouts, but it just offended him. The twins tried making small talk with the soldiers they were practically living with, but it was apparent that they knew as little as the twins. Do you enjoy your time as a gnome every day? Connor asked a soldier. It isn't altogether unpleasant, the soldier said with a shrug. It gives me a lot of time to think. Speak for yourself, the other soldier said. I had a pigeon sit on my head for 4 hours yesterday, and he left a present on me, if you catch my drift. Gross, Connor said. Can't you just turn back into a man and shoo it away? Alex asked. I wish, the soldier explained. We can't only transform back if there's danger. Otherwise, we'd all be shooting off pigeons and blowing our cover. Alex and Connor made a mental note of this. Later that night, the twins had just finished dinner when a bright flash came out of nowhere. The twins looked up, and floating down from the ceiling was a sky blue envelope. It's from the fairy godmother, Xanthos said, and flew up into the air to retrieve it. Apparently, a fairy didn't need wings to fly. He hovered in the air a few feet above the ground while he read it, keeping it out of the twins' sight. Alex and Connor stood below him. Xanthos' eyes grew larger as he read the note from their grandmother. I see, he said when he was finished reading. He floated down and faced the twins. Your grandmother would like me to pass along some information to you, Xanthos said. Yes? Alex asked. They were practically vibrating with anticipation. We believe your mother is in our world, Xanthos said. That is all. He placed the envelope on his shoulder, and the flames devoured it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Connor asked, unsatisfied with the update. Neither. It's just information she'd like you to have at this time, Xanthos said. The twins let out an exasperated sigh. Knowing more almost made it worse. Later that night, Alex pulled Connor into her bedroom to speak with him privately. She turned up her radio so Lambton's canine hearing couldn't pick up what they were saying. "Mom's in the fairy tale world," she said to him. "You know what that means." "What?" Connor asked. "It means I think Grandma may have lied to us," Alex said. "How else could Mom have gotten there without her knowing about it? Maybe she isn't the only fairy who's capable of traveling between worlds." Connor nodded. "I don't think Grandma lied to us," Connor said. "I think we're just mad at her right now, so we're trying to blame her for anything we can." Alex rubbed her tired eyes. She knew he wasn't altogether wrong. "Just a few days ago I was worried about Grandma and angry with Mom, and now I'm worried sick about Mom and furious with Grandma," Alex said. "I'm crazy how fast things change." "Yeah, it is," Connor said with a sigh. "How do you think Mom got there then?" Alex asked. Connor thought on it for a good moment. "I wonder if there's more than one way to get into the land of stories," he said. Alex's head jerked back up at him. She had spent so much time hugging books and trying to recreate their last portal, she never thought about other options. "Like what?" Alex said. "I don't know," Connor said, "but if Grandma's storybook had the capability, I'm sure she would have created other ways over the years, right?" "It would only make sense that she would have created other ways to come and go," Alex said, thinking out loud. "Not for her necessarily, but for the other fairies she recruited to help spread the stories around our world, right?" Connor's eyes widened and he pursed his lips. "What's your question?" Alex asked him. "I hate that you guys know I have a question," Connor said, and then asked, "Are you sure there's no way you could make a portal on your own?" Alex would have loved to believe that she was capable too, but she knew in her heart that if she was, she would have surely found a way by now. "No, it was Grandma's magic," Alex said. I just turned it on," Connor asked. "Right," Alex said. "Then I wonder if Grandma has anything else we could turn on," Connor said. Another thought dawned on Alex as soon as he said this. "And maybe that's why she didn't know where Mom was," she said, nodding to herself. "Maybe someone had gotten a hold of something like her storybook and used it to get to Mom." They looked to each other and small smiles appeared on their faces. They weren't smiles of happiness, but smiles of achievement. They knew they were onto something. They could feel it. "But who?" Connor asked. If you like this read out loud, please like and subscribe to my channel so we can read the next chapter together.